when a 9-mile wide asteroid struck Earth 66 million years ago. It exploded with a force that was greater than a million atomic bombs and wiped out three-quarters of life on Earth, including the non-avian dinosaurs. But we know that some members of the dinosaur family tree survived, eking out a living in the post-impact world and eventually proliferating to become today's bird. The long-standing question then arises is why certain birds lived while others died in the mass extinction event at the end of the Cretaceous period. Well, stay tuned to Gateway to Knowledge to know how did dino-era birds survive the asteroid apocalypse. Perhaps it is because the impact and its aftermath obliterated forests worldwide, leading to the mass extinction of the prehistoric tree-dwelling birds. The only birds that survived were ground dwellers, including ancient relatives of ducks, chickens, and ostriches. These survivors rapidly evolved into most of the lineages of the modern birds from which we are very familiar today. And it is a very amazing and new hypothesis to explain both extinction and survival. The extent to which the evolutionary history of the major modern groups like birds, mammals, and flowering plants were influenced by the end of the Cretaceous mass extinction event is only now coming into focus. This global catastrophe left such an indelible signature on the evolutionary trajectories of these groups that we can still find it out after 66 million years later. To help support this argument, they compiled a mass of evidence from disparate sources, which included data collected from the massive new family trees for living birds and also the analysis of the spores and pollen from the rock layer laid down immediately following the impact. So this study actually begins with the analysis of how bird ecology have changed over evolutionary history. After looking at the evolutionary relationship between more than 10,000 bird species living today, the team realized that it suggests that the initial survivals had been ground dwelling, hinting that there had been global deforestation in their shared past. These analyses also showed that the most recent common ancestors of all living birds and all bird lineages that crossed the end Cretaceous boundary were likely ground dwelling. Researchers have already long inferred the asteroid impact caused the global wildfires, but this team have now bolstered the argument for total forest obliteration. In a thick layer formed during the first 1,000 or so years after the asteroid impact, 70 to 90% of the spores found come from just two species of the fern. These fern spikes represent evidence of disaster flora. The researcher says that it may have taken thousands of years for mature forests to return and their composition was forever changed. Furthermore, an analysis of the most common fossil birds of the late Cretaceous era suggests that most of them were tree-dwelling. None of these birds survived because their habitat had entirely vanished. In addition, newly discovered fossil representatives of the living groups of birds from the period shortly after the impact appear to have been ground dwellers, based on the proportion of their legs. These observations are consistent with the idea that ground-dwelling lineages survived across the end Cretaceous boundary and then repeatedly took to the trees once global forest had rebounded. So this is a tantalizing new hypothesis that provides a suitable explanation for the extinction of arboreal groups of arctic birds at the end of the Cretaceous period. However, the data still don't explain why a number of prehistoric birds that didn't live in trees were also went extinct. And one of the nicest aspects of this new study is that it is testable. The same cannot be said for all the explanation for why dinosaurs went extinct. So like all good hypotheses, it will also stimulate new research and new questions, and that will be the part of our next topic. So if you enjoyed my today's video, then do subscribe to my channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified about my latest videos.